CityCast from Explocity.
In one of his dispatches from the front lines in North Africa during World War II, Ernest Hemingway wrote this about Italian soldiers. When these soldiers were injured slightly, they would proclaim loudly, swearing undying loyalty to Il Duce, Benito Mussolini. But when they were mortally wounded and lay dying on the battlefield, they would forget all about Mussolini. Instead, they would invoke their mothers. Mamma mia, they would say softly of their fate. One of the many vivid descriptions in Vaasanthi's book, Cutouts, Caste and Cine Stars, a book about a recent period in Tamil Nadu politics, she described a parade that honored the chief minister and matinee idol, M.G. Ramachandran, or MGR. One float in particular was pulled by an MGR fan with ropes attached by hooks to the man's bare and bleeding back. But that was an exception, Vaasanthi said. She wrote, and I quote, "But on the whole, MGR fans prefer to flatter than to suffer." Vaasanthi's prose is replete with such observations. Vaasanthi found her muse, her expression, her creative expression, principally through the voices of women. One of her subjects is the fascinating actor and badass politician Jayalalitha, who had overcome the worst odds as a woman in the face of extreme and often physical misogyny of Tamil Nadu politics to become something of the queen of the state. And this from the very political platform that rejected such notions of hierarchical superiority, leave alone royalty. Vaasanthi's prose is the happy result of creative writing meeting disciplined journalism. She is bilingual in a real sense. Her writing in the English language, by which she has authored several books, is as real as her deep literary skills in Tamil. Her translators and my journalist friends have told me as much. It's an honor for me to welcome her as a guest on my show. Vaasanthi, welcome to the Literary City.
Thank you. So happy to be with you here.
First, your book on Jayalalitha. Everyone knows that she was not very media friendly in such an event as her biographer. How do you plumb the depths of her mind? How do you know the answer to the question, why?
I think she was an extraordinarily brilliant woman. I mean, she was a very intelligent woman. And then circumstances actually shaped her the way she was. And I think it was because of the way she was treated by the main world, both in the world and the political world, And she had a lot of things against her. She was a Brahmin, and she was educated. She was a woman, and she was not a product of the Dravidian movement at all. She had come. She was born and brought up in Mysore, and she lived in Bangalore, and then she came. People said she was a Kannadiga actually. So when MGR, the matinee idol of those days, saw her and was so fascinated by her and besotted, that changed her life completely. She was given film roles and all that, and she became a very sought after actress. But it was a male world, and she must have met with a lot of humiliations, and so that must have hurt her very deeply. And there was a coterie that wanted MGR to be away from her because he had great dreams about him, his coming to power. And so they tried their best to draw her away from MGR, and in fact, draw MGR away from her clutches, they said. And that must have angered her, and she was a person who never accepted defeat or humiliation, and all this must have made her so haughty because she knew that she was far superior in intelligence to all the menfolk around. And when she came to power, it made her think that she had to show that she was worse than the men around her. And she had to, unless she was more aggressive than they were, she could not win in her battle.
Speaking of battle, in recent times the world has known many tough women heads of state: Indira Gandhi, Margaret Thatcher, Srimavo Bandar Nayaka, Golda Meir. They have all started wars, if not conflicts. How is Jayalalitha distinct from these ladies?
Jayalalitha was also a strong woman in her own right. But then, there was no occasion to start a war here in Tamil Nadu.
Of course.
So,
She did have her share of battle, right?
yes, especially Karunanidhi. Karunanidhi was kind of, he thought he could just crush this woman.
Mm-hmm.
They all ridiculed her when she left the assembly in anger and said she would not step into that until she came back as a chief minister.
And she had to flee the assembly because she was
Yes.
assaulted, right? I mean, physically assaulted.
Yes, in the assembly. So they just laughed it away, the guts and the conceit this woman had, and how dare she. And so, but then he found to his astonishment the greatest strength of Jayalalitha was the support of the masses. She had this charisma which no other person after MGR had in ADMK, the party she led. So that was her greatest strength. When she became the chief minister, it was a big revelation to her also, I think, because she was holding on to MGR's name as a talisman during her campaigns and all that. But once she came to power with a massive majority and crowd surging to hear her speak or to just see her, you see, she was good looking, charming, and she knew the way to speak to the masses in a very, cordial way, very endearing way. And so they just fell for her, and that gave her the confidence that she did not need any talisman. She could win the elections on her own, and it was her strength. She realized her strength at that time. And so that was the thing, biggest thing, that because she could defeat the DMK. And Karunanidhi's biggest threat she became. And Karunanidhi lost election several times at her hand.
Her affability didn't extend to the media, did it?
He couldn't tolerate any criticism. That is why she was against the media all the time. Wanted people only to praise her, and she never liked, all dictators. No dictator wants any criticism. So neither Indira Gandhi nor Srimao, they liked anybody to criticize.
So, a despot by a different yardstick. Jayalalitha didn't come from politics, so she must have arrived with a sense of insecurity. And
Yes.
the contrast is Indira Gandhi. She had come from privilege and from a political background. So there is the distinction.
Yes, certainly. Jayalalitha came from the film world as well, though she didn't. She was a very reluctant actress, she said, but once she entered acting, she became a full-fledged actress. And also, the kind of men she had to deal with made her devoid of all nuances, that are needed. That you see in Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi had so many other interests in nature and so many other things, and whatever it may be. But Indira Gandhi was totally different, and her times were different, and the culture, Dravidian culture is different, and you have to react the way the others attack you.
So, did she live the politics or use the politics?
She didn't do either. That is, it was her own politics. She could never claim to be a Dravidianist. She did not feel shy to go to the temples and show herself as a believer. And she was quite different. And though Karunanidhi proclaimed that he was an atheist, and he was an atheist.
The politics of the state of Tamil Nadu appears to have moved from a post-independence national consciousness to the revolution and escaped this austere atheist intellectual decay movement into a dependence on larger-than-life personalities, cinestars and cutouts. And you came back to Tamil Nadu and to its politics as a journalist into this environment. I'd like to quote from your book. I watched Tamil Nadu politics at close quarters for nearly a decade and marveled at the theatrics of the two dominant regional parties, the high drama between Karunanidhi and Jayalalitha, the like of which you see nowhere else in the country. One is a film scriptwriter and the other a former actress, and there is no dearth of drama and rhetoric. So, did you have re-entry problems?
It was fascinating. I have always been a good student, I loved, reading about all this, and I was quite fascinated. And then I was surprised at the growing religiosity among the masses there. What happened was there was a kind of upward mobility in the form of beliefs. It was a kind of a Sanskritization, you can say, of the public, the backward community, all the backward classes that had come forward now because of education, they started behaving like the Brahmins. They started inventing new rituals and traditions and all that, in fact, more than the Brahmins. The Brahmins have long forgotten some of the rituals, but
I dare say.
started, this Tiruvannamalai, Girivala, and all that. I've never heard earlier. But these people started going around the hills, and I don't know how many times ago, but it was started by all these people. Of course, partly it was commercial in a sense. But still, there were so many rituals and customs and traditions that were reinvented by these. So it didn't become a casteless society as Periyar claimed.
So, in your analysis, was this new religiosity a groundswell movement or was it fostered?
The general public. The general public became, they were now, they had the freedom to um, perform all the rituals that was, the Brahmins thought they were the custodians.
Back to the business of your re entry into Tamil Nadu. Both Jayalalitha and a male colleague of yours, you write, told you that you wouldn't understand Tamil Nadu politics because you weren't the right kind of Tamilian. Did it bother you?
No, I didn't much care for all this. So, because I was so busy and engrossed in my work. I was writing a regular column in India Today, which all the politicians read those days, and Karunanidhi especially. He was a keen reader of my columns. He would read the very morning it appeared, and then he would call me at 6 o'clock in the morning and admonish me if it was page to him, and or else he will praise me. He said,
Right.
"You have written very well."
Yes, I've been told that Karunanidhi enjoyed journalism and he would engage with journalists.
Karunanidhi had this habit because he himself was a journalist.
Right. And Jayalalitha wasn't.
But Jayalalitha would never respond to any of the things. She would only take you to court, defamation suit.
The current governance of Tamil Nadu seems to be based on pragmatism. Does the journalist in you agree?
Yes, I think so. I think Stalin has brought about a kind of a change in the way he deals with the opposition parties, and generally speaking, they say he is very communicative with his officers and all that. But I am no longer in Tamil Nadu, so I cannot give you the first-hand information. But the general feeling is he is not like Karunanidhi or Jayalalitha, who don't communicate with the opposition party people and all that. He seems to be quite tolerant. I mean, giving them space in the assembly, making them speak and all that. So I think there is a change in the atmosphere, and it has to change. Times are changing, and it's a very natural process, I think.
So, this natural process, has the state moved on from giant cutouts?
Yes, because he has forbidden his cadres to, raise cutouts and even to praise him in the assembly. He says there are more important things to discuss, and don't waste your time praising me. All these are welcome changes.
Before I move on to your book, another question. As a journalist and a biographer, how do you reconcile with sometimes what you see and encounter is different from what you have read and researched?
Oh, one complements the other, I suppose. Your personal experience, and also, my being a creative writer as well. I honestly feel, I don't know if you agree with me or believe my words. A creative writer's perception helps a journalist. A journalist being also a creative writer. You can perceive certain things that another day-to-day journalist perceives. That's what I feel. You have a kind of a sixth sense. I feel you may think that I'm a little conceited in saying that, but certain things come to the creative writer's mind, and that is why I'm saying what you read and what you see, they complement each other. And apart from that, above all that, you have your own perception of the way people behave, of the way there are twists in history, and why certain things happen.
Give me an example.
For instance, as I told you, when Jayalalitha stood before the crowds after her victory, it must have been a kind of a feeling of freedom. He was free from the clutches of the memory, the haunting memory of MGR. She must have felt, that she was liberated. It was a sense of liberation. So I thought that that was a creative writer's perception because no other has written like that.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty creative. In this case, your insight was her state of mind.
So because the people were saying, that she had stopped talking about MGR. Why? They said. So this is the explanation. She felt liberated.
And duly liberated, she came into her own. And how? And now moving on to your book. Your new book is called Breaking Free. It has just been released. And would you mind summarizing this book for our listeners?
No, it is about three generations of women, and the protagonist is Kasturi, who is a Devadasi. Devadasi were, I mean, the servants of God, literally translated. And as I have written in the afterword, you must have read my afterword, and so it was a chance meeting with the Devadasis that happened. One, during our editorial meeting, each one throws an idea to write a story. And someone said, what happened to those Devadasis of yesteryears who were so famous, no one talks about it? Because once I met an IAS officer, Guhan, who was deeply interested in arts, and he was a friend of Bala Saraswati. He said the Devadasis, the service they rendered to art has been completely forgotten. Nobody speaks about them. And Bharatanatyam now has been taken over by upper caste women. And so that's a very sad thing, he said. And so then during the editorial meeting in India Today, I just noted this question: what has happened to the Devadasis? And does anyone know if there are those old Devadasis, famous Devadasis, still alive. And so we made a search, and then we found out that there were about 4 or 5 Devadasis who were very famous in their time. And they were staying in various places like Tanjavur and Pudukkottai and other places. And since I am very interested in dance and music, I have learned dance and music when I was young. So I had a deep interest in this subject. So I went to see these Devadasis. And then I found them so fascinating. They were all in their 80s. Then when I asked them to sing, a very famous musician she was once, and she had won the Kalaimamani award from Karunanidhi. And I asked her to sing. She at once sang, and she was so happy to find that there was someone who was asking her to sing. And then she sang so beautifully. And then I went to another place to meet the once famous dancer Jayalakshmi. He was actually bedridden at the time. She had no teeth and her hair was all grey. And then I said, "My, you are in bed. I came so eagerly to see if you could show me some of the abhinayas," I said. She at once got up from the bed, sat on the bed, of course, and asked her granddaughter or someone nearby. She asked her to bring a mirror, and then she just made her hair like this, and then she showed me some abhinaya. She mimed. I had tears in my eyes. I tell you, she was so old, but then the spark that came to their eyes when they spoke about art, it showed how deeply they were in, pursuing that art form. And I met several others. One Mridangam Vidwan, and all. She was living like an ascetic. And they all spoke how much they were immersed in their art. And when I asked them about the humiliation they met, because Devadasis as a community fell under this thing,
Disrepute.
uh,
Yeah, that's right.
and so when I asked them, they just brushed it aside. They said it showed that they just didn't care about all those things because they were so preoccupied with what they were doing. And like a true Advaiti, they neither praise nor insult touched them.
And by what process did that become a book?
I wrote an article about them and how their art was forgotten, and then nobody pursues in the Devadasi community now. They are called Ishayvedalas, and but still, none of their children pursue art now. The whole community shuns the word Devadas. They don't want to speak about it, mention about it. Such was their humiliation, feeling of hurt. But I wrote this article, and there was such a furor even in the assembly because they thought I was trying to revive the Devadasi system. And then they wrote such nasty things about me. And I was totally shocked. It was a cultural shock to me, having gone from, born and brought up in Karnataka and lived in the north. I was shocked. It was very nasty the way they wrote about me in their journals.
And that incident led to the story in Breaking Free. It's quite fascinating. Towards the middle of the book, there's a passage, the pages really, where Kasturi is heckled by an audience before she can dance, because this audience doesn't want a Devdasi dancing, but one thing leads to another, and she dances, and then she is applauded hugely. And that is actually a very interesting fulcrum point in the book, but no spoilers here. For all our listeners, there's a link in the podcast description to where you might buy a copy of Breaking Free. And moving on now to your abilities as a bilingual person and a bilingual writer, I don't need to ask. I mean, I can tell that you think in English, you do mental math in English, you grew up in Bangalore, it's where you went to school, so you would have had a different multidimensional environment. But when you write Tamil fiction, Tamil prose, you must immerse yourself completely in that ambit, correct?
Yeah, Tamil. Because when I write fiction, it is always Tamil. I cannot write fiction in English. I write only non-fiction in English. But if it is fiction, it is only Tamil. I feel I feel very relaxed, and I feel I am one with the language.
Do you ever translate your own work?
I've done one story, but then it is such a bother, to go back to the same, that intensity of feeling with which you wrote the original story. And to go back to that, it's a bit difficult. And then I feel I can write some other story during that time.
And that makes so much sense. Now to end with a question that's got to be the cliche of cliches. What's next for you?
I don't know. Maybe I'll write some short stories in Tamil.
Well, that gives us something to look forward to.
Oh, that's very nice. It's always nice to have readers.
Well, you have one right here. And Vaasanthi, on that note, thank you so much for being my guest on the Literary City today.
Thank you so much. And this was an amazing conversation that we have had. And I'm very happy for it.
The privilege was all mine.
Thank you, Ramji.
And that was the fascinating Vaasanthi, a writer, author, journalist, equally fluent in English and in Tamil. And I'll be back with What's That Word? And I'm back with What's That Word, a fun segment where we look at words and phrases that we use every day but never stop to think about. And here she is. You know her from a whole season before. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Praniti, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
And hello again, P with an A. How's it going? Hey, did you know that the letter P is both versatile and adaptable?
As am I.
Right. There is no P in modesty.
So, is there significance to the letter P?
Yes, the P is interesting. You know, I have had a long-standing interest and involvement in typography, but I won't go there today. It's too boring. Although the how letters came to be formed has very interesting history, but the P is interesting for other reasons.
Oh, goody. And what is that?
Right. Drawing from the Phoenician symbol PE, the Greeks kind of made it their own and they called it pi, the geometry fundamental. And then the Romans made it their 16th letter of the alphabet, and that's the way we know it today.
Wow. So, my name is related to that complex math phenomenon, pi.
Yes, true. And there are some similarities between you and pi.
Cool. What similarity with pi?
Pi never stops. And there are differences.
Oh, no. What?
Sometimes P is silent.
Hey, what sort of co-host would I be if I didn't say a word now?
Okay.
But listen, are there many words with the silent P?
No, not many. Just 10.
That's it?
Yeah. Well, only 5 if you count all the words beginning with psycho as one.
Yeah, like psychology.
Right, psychology.
Yeah, and psychotherapy, psychiatry.
Psychosomatic, psychotic.
Okay, that's 5. And the other 5 are?
Off the balance, 2 begin with P. Those would be pseudo and pneumonia. And the others have the silent P elsewhere, like coup, cupboard, receipt.
Yeah, that's interesting. We never stop to think about this, do we?
We do. That's our job. We're doing it now.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I mean, this whole thing is like an out-of-body experience.
Well, you know that P is not the only letter of the English alphabet that is silent.
Like?
There are 12 others, and I'll name them. B, C, D, E, G, H, K, L, N, T, U and W.
Interesting. But when is the E silent? Like, how can an E be silent?
I see what you mean. Well, the E can be silent at the end of a word.
Oh, right. Like debate.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, now the letter W. Give me a word with a silent W.
Okay, here's one. Awry.
Awry, of course. Yes, spelled Awry.
Correct.
But, I have heard people pronounce this word Ori.
Tell them not to.
Next time I will.
Okay, P with an A. What else do we have today?
So your interview with Vaasanthi, I enjoyed listening to her and learned so much about the Devdasis.
Yeah.
Her story was so touching.
Vaasanthi, she's great.
And she's a Bangalore girl, just like me.
Yes, she is a Bangalore girl. And she studied in Kamalabai School, as did my mother around the same time, as I discovered while chatting with her.
Wow, that's cool.
Indeed. Well, okay. P with an A, what's that word?
In your interview with Vaasanthi, she used the word coterie. It sounds French.
Yes, it is an interesting word.
Yeah, so I know coterie means specific people who belong to a group, but dish on the etymology.
Yes, you're right. Coterie is from the French, and the word has its origins in the feudal system. You see, originally the word referred to a group of peasants who are in the service of, well, let's call him a feudal lord. And when they organized into a group, they were called a coterie. Now, coterie comes from the word cote, which means cottage, and its larger meaning is people of similar interests. And the earliest recorded use of this word was back in the 18th century, say about 1730-ish, from the Middle French. And that was drawing from medieval Latin. And it referred to, as I said, an association of tenant farmers.
Right, but it is used wider these days, right?
Sort of. Well, not really, if you think about it. The word refers to a group of people with similar interests. So you would not be wrong to refer to a, say, coterie of artists or a coterie of lawyers.
Speaking of whom, the word is not used in a positive way, is it? I mean, Vaasanthi used the word in a pretty negative sense.
Quite right. In politics, for instance, when you hear coterie, you always think of cabals and backstabbing sycophants.
Right.
So, political leaders are known to have a coterie of individuals who become useful and typically in some underhanded way.
Yeah, and actors and other rich people have a coterie around them, don't they?
They do.
What are they called now? An entourage.
Entourage, another French word. The French clearly had something against, groups of self-interested people with a self-serving agenda. I wonder why.
Except for Bastille Day, when a very large group of people brought down Louis XVI.
Well, that large group of people wasn't the coterie. Louis XVI's coterie was beheaded, remember?
That's true. Hey, wait a second. That anniversary is tomorrow, July 14th.
Ah oui, demain, 14 juillet.
Vive la révolution!
Well, in celebration, you must go and warm up those croissants that you have for tomorrow in your microwave. The one that makes very useful révolutions.
On my way. Allons, mes enfants, already.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for being here and for listening, and see you again next Wednesday.